All right, so now we are going to examine a fantasy conjured by Christina Rossetti. She was not technically one of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, but she had contributed, had helped edit, had been a fan, had encouraged, affirmed, almost married one of the members, and continued to write works that were recommended by the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, in part through the germ that Dante published during the first iteration of the PRB. She continues to write poetry, and this particular poem was written well after the first gen PRB had ended, and as the second one was underway. Notice the dates. 1859, this is a year before she begins working at the Highgate House of Charity for quote-unquote fallen women, women who had become pregnant outside of wedlock. So she is very sensitized to their needs and to the way that they have been discarded by sometimes their families and often by society at large. And like Josephine Butler, wanted to rehabilitate them and to consider them sisters, sisters who had fallen on hard times, but sisters nonetheless. Now, this poem has what Alfred Tennyson called parabolic drift. He used this term when describing his Idylls of the King, some Arthurian legends that he put in narrative form. There is a parabolic drift. It's not utterly explicit, but there is a message embedded in the poem. And if we read closely enough, we can find some rather explicit recommendations when it comes to the issue of temptation. In fact, Christina's brother Michael, she had more than one, noted, and this is something that he wrote, "I have more than once heard Christina aver that the poem has not any profound or ulterior meaning. It is just a fairy tale. Yet one can discern that it implies at any rate this much, that to succumb to temptation makes one a victim to that same continuous temptation, that the remedy does not always lie with oneself, and that a stronger and more righteous will may prove of avail or help to restore one's lost estate or situation." So her brother saw that it had some basic lessons concerning temptation and the way that we can stand in the gap to assist one another when someone is caught in a web, which perhaps they have helped to weave themselves. I'm going to be using a number of different illustrations. The first one we're seeing was created by her brother, Dante. There were a number of these that came out with the poem when it was first published. So let's consider Christina's diction choices and whether they resemble those of Dante, her brother. Is the tone of this poem as playful as, say, Winter My Secret? Or is it more serious, like the poem In an Artist's Studio, which is actually a critique of her brother's philandering ways and the way that he strung Lizzie Siddal along for a decade before marrying her? Of course, she would commit suicide, and Christina did not know that when she wrote the poem In an Artist's Studio, but she did know it when she published the poem decades after the fact. Morning and evening, maids heard the goblins cry, "Come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy." So the repetition, the long lists, almost like you would find in Leaves of Grass by Whitman, so many itemized lists here, does create sometimes a light and whimsical tone in this particular poem. The brevity of each line, they're very short, also lends itself to a children's story, right? Something that's easily accessible to a young age. And this continues throughout, but it's going to change, and it becomes more and more serious before lightening again, because there's a happy ending. Let's consider some of the similes. We have a number of lists of similes used to describe Laura. This is beginning in line 81 through 86. Laura stretched her gleaming neck like a rush-embedded swan, like a lily from the beck, like a moonlight poplar branch, like a vessel at the launch when its last restraint is gone. So, gleaming neck, comparing her to a white swan, suggests a kind of female innocence, as does lily, the moonlit poplar branch. So her whiteness is described, and I think here it has nothing to do with ethnicity, but it is more, or race, but it is more a signal to us that she has, to this point, inexperienced in certain things, innocent. Like a vessel at the launch when its last restraint is gone. So this is foreshadowing. We know that she's about to launch out into the ocean. Whether she's going to be swamped by what she encounters or buoyed to the top is at this point an open question. There are other groups of similes throughout the poem. Let's see if we can find a few of those, where we get lots of likes in quick succession. For instance, lines 184 and following. Golden head by golden head, like two pigeons in one nest, folded in each other's wings, they lay down in their curtain bed, like two blossoms on one stem, like two flakes of new-fallen snow, like two wands of ivory. I think it's very important that we remember as we move through the poem this description. Pigeons in a nest, blossoms on a stem. They are one and the same. They are so closely knit, these sisters, that they are connected on a biological level. So when we see them physically intimate later, post-Freud, it's very difficult for us to look at physical closeness, even between blood kin. And for some people, it's difficult to not assume that there's something sexual going on. And there have been a number of literary critics who have taken this poem and interpreted it in ways which I would argue are far removed from what Christina Rossetti would have intended, assuming that we care about authorial intent. There is nothing overtly sexual between the sisters, I would argue, and you can disagree with me if you like. There's a lot of kissing and drinking and all of this, of fluids, but I think it requires a certain kind of temperament to move in that direction. And admittedly, some of the images that came up later on in the 19th century, and particularly in the 20th century, have been highly sexual, even not just between the goblins and Laura, but depicting the relationship between the sisters. I don't think that we need to assume, however, that there's anything like that implied or intended by the author. And there's other groups of similes. We'll look at some of those in due course. So why draw attention to the fact that they're maidens? We don't know how old they are. One of them, let's see, Lizzie puts dimpled fingers in her ears. So this suggests either that she's plump or that she's young. And they are described as maidens. There's a ship later on that's described as virgin. So it's not difficult for us to imagine that this poem is providing some commentary on some of the sexual temptations that can lie in wait for young women in the Victorian period. None of the goblins are female. Now, they're not really masculine in a human sense. They are very bestial, very animal-like. But they are all male. And I think that's appropriate that we have this tension between the two young girls and these leering, grabbing men. Now, Jeannie is, in lines 158 and 159, a friend of theirs who has apparently died. And if we look at the language, it suggests that she had some kind of experience that was relational. Let's see. She met the goblins in the moonlight, line 148, took their gifts, ate their fruits, and line 154, she pined and pined away, found them no more, but dwindled and grew gray. And when she's mentioned again later on, let's see, lines 312 and following, or 309. Poor Laura could not hear, longed to buy fruit to comfort her, but feared to pay too dear. She thought of Jeannie, this is line 312, she thought of Jeannie in her grave, who should have been a bride, but who for joys brides hope to have, fell sick and died in her gay prime. Well, if that's not an oblique description of an STD that kills you, I don't know what is. And that's Jeannie. Why won't the goblins accept the coin that Lizzie proffers for fruit? So Laura is the one who says, don't heed the goblin men. It's a little bit ironic that at the very beginning of the poem, even though she bows her head to hear in line 34, she is the one who says, we must not look at goblin men, line 42. And yet she is the one who looks. Whereas Lizzie, line 35, veiled her blushes, and she says, we should not look. Laura initially speaks the right words, and yet she looks, and her eyes draw the rest of her body after her. She reared her glossy head, line 52. And so she gives in, and she proffers the currency they wish for, which is not a coin, it's a golden curl. So she gives something of her own body to them in order to gain these fruits. When Lizzie tries to get fruit from them and purchase it with coin, they don't want the coin, they want something that is more intimate, and she refuses to give it. So they squeeze the fruits all over her, and she gets it in the crevices of her body, which she's excited about because she knows that her sister's going to be able to lick those crevices, like as it gets into the part between her collarbone and just these little divots in her body where the juices are trapped, which then her sister will be able to consume. Now, she doesn't know exactly what's going to happen. Lizzie only knows that Laura is desperately hungry for more of this, and she knows that she can offer it. She doesn't know it's going to actually cure her because Lizzie's not going to be able to stomach these juices anymore because of the way that she received them. Now, the goblin's treatment of Lizzie is very, very troubling. It's I mean, you know, a child is going to read this differently than an adult. Let's see here. The lines of actually okay. So they're parleying with her in lines 375 and following. They're trying to describe why she should eat these fruits. And she says, "Thank you, but one waits at home alone for me. So without further parleying, if you will not sell me any, give me back my silver penny." And then, line 392, they're no longer agreeable. They are visibly demurring, grunting, and snarling. One called her proud. Well, that definitely is a line that could be delivered by a guy to a gal who's not giving him what he wants, calling her proud, cross-grained, uncivil. Their tones waxed loud, their looks were evil. They began to elbow and jostle her, claw, bark, mew, hiss, mock, twitched her hair out by the roots, stamped about her tender feet, and tried to squeeze things into her mouth. And then here's another one of those simile lists, where she stands like a lily in a flood, a rock of blue-veined stone. Line 412, like a beacon left alone. Line 418, like a virgin, a royal virgin town. So she is not opening to them, and there are attempts to invade her orifices and squeeze things into her mouth. They are mad to tug her standard down, line 421. So her standard literally would mean her flag, that which is a symbol of what she represents, but also her honor, right? There's a moral valence to this. They bully and besot her and so on, and they kick her, and it's very abusive. It's approaching sexual assault. So when she runs from them, she's not scared because she actually bears all of this abuse. And in this, most definitely, given Christina Rossetti's, the religious framework within which she's working, Lizzie is meant to be seen as a kind of Christ figure. She says, line 473, "For your sake I have braved the glen," and had to do with goblin merchantmen. So she sacrifices her own comfort, her own well-being, and gets mauled in order to be able to help her sister. So one critic said that Rossetti exploits and subverts the notion that women are objects of the gaze. And I think that's appropriate. We see the women are the ones who are gazing, right? Laura's gaze actually gets her into trouble. But then Lizzie also gazes at the goblin men and stands toe-to-toe with them, looking directly at them, and stands her ground and does not yield to what they're trying to offer her. So that notion of women being merely the passive objects of the gaze is most definitely subverted. The women come out on top here, and they teach what they've learned to their kids once they have children of their own. Some want to go with, hug me, kiss me, suck my juices, 468 as being sexual. So I at least need to mention that because some literary critics like to develop that idea. Eat me, drink me, love me, line 471. I think if we, line 492, she kissed and kissed her with a hungry mouth. So we can go with, sexuality, or we can go with deep love, deep concern, and there's a kind of magical moment here with religious overtones, with one who's sacrificed for the other. And there's a kind of, in the same way that the Eucharist in Christianity represents Christ's blood, the juices here represent a kind of saving drink as well that Lizzie drinks from her sister. And then it's almost as if, did you notice this? It's almost as if Laura has been possessed and the demon is being exorcised. Line 493. Her lips began to scorch. That juice was wormwood to her tongue. She loathed the feast. Writhing as when possessed, she leapt and sung, rent all her robe and wrung her hands in lamentable haste and beat her breast. Her locks streamed like the torch borne by a racer at full speed, or like the mane of horses, etc. And then it's as if this demon is cast out. But we're not sure what the result is at first. She fell, line 521. She fell at last. Pleasure past and anguish past. Is it death? Or is it life? Life out of death. And then Lizzie watches her very carefully that night, and she rises the next morning well. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood resurrected itself in the mid-50s. And this involves a number of thinkers and creative types. Again, Dante Gabriel Rossetti is in the lead. He's the head of this group, with a little bit more experience behind him at this point. Edward Burne-Jones, whose painting of Merlin being seduced here, and that would have been drawn on Alfred Lord Tennyson's Idylls of the King. And William Morris, who is best known today as a poet and a fantasy writer. He wrote a number of fiction novels. But here we see an example of the wallpaper that he designed. Very, very popular wallpaper designs that still exist. A lot of this wallpaper still covers the walls of Victorian homes that were made in the 19th century. Charles Swinburne is the Charles Algernon Swinburne is the wild card in the group. He is interested in all kinds of topics that are not appropriate for polite conversation. So there are a number of different ways in which these writers, Swinburne and Morris and Rossetti, at this stage in his life, intersect. Their concerns involve the subconscious, and the way that reason is sometimes compromised by irrational feeling. These poems and paintings are much less likely to be didactic, to try to extend to us a moral lesson and encourage us to adopt it. They often jump around in time, or there are huge gaps as they move from an event to event, so that not everything is spelled out for us. This is particularly true of William Morris, but also Dante Gabriel Rossetti. If you've read the poem Jenny by Dante, you see that he spends a lot of time inside the mind of a young man who's returning to a brothel and has just spent time with a prostitute and is wondering what's going on inside her mind. And of course, his musings reveal so much more about what's going on inside his mind. The iconoclastic, the strange, the uncanny, these things are explored particularly by Swinburne in his poems. But all of them are iconoclastic. They are overturning traditional mores and expectations for what a narrative is supposed to do in this era. They are influenced by the exotic, and of course, any culture counts as exotic what lies outside itself. And for European culture, this would be influences from Asia, particularly from Japan. And this Japanese influence is going to be huge. At the end of the 19th century, it's going to heavily influence Oscar Wilde. Now, because of the shall we say, the licentious nature of some of the poetry that's coming out with the second gen, Robert Buchanan and a number of other critics targeted the PRB and for its preoccupation with sexuality. Weary, wasting, yet exquisite sensuality. So admitting that the sensuality is very evocative, but not embracing it for that fact. There's a lot of extreme emotion here. Buchanan does not find much compassion, much tenderness, and suggests that many of these characters that we run into seem to be psychologically compromised. There's an overflowing of sensibility or emotional sensitivity, and he sees that as a problem. These characters are led by their emotions and by their impulses. And they are often explicit in a sexual way, and again, not teaching us the kinds of lessons that we want children to be learning when they read poems. So not appropriate for children. Now, The Defense of Guinevere by William Morris is one of my favorite poems from this period because it is so compelling, and it puts us in a quandary because there are certain characteristics of Guinevere that we want to laud, that we want to praise, and at the same time, it is very clear that she is stepping outside the bounds of fidelity to her husband, King Arthur, and for that, I think we are supposed to at least consider censuring her. Now, if you haven't already, please pause this and read the poem on your own. It's a tour de force dramatically. This is what Robert Browning called a monodram. And yet I am going to break it into pieces. I'm going to explicate it as I read it. So make sure that you give yourself an opportunity to just read through it first. Okay, hopefully you have done that. But, knowing now that they would have her speak, she threw her wet hair backward from her brow, her hand close to her mouth, touching her cheek, as though she had had there a shameful blow, and feeling it shameful to feel aught but shame all through her heart, yet felt her cheek burn so she must a little touch it. Like one lame, she walked away from Gawain with her head still lifted up, and on her cheek of flame the tears dried quick. She stopped at last and said, okay, so the first 10 lines. It starts in the middle of the action, and we know immediately that she's able to read from the situation what they are expecting from her. They want her to confess something. Now her hair is wet, and she throws it backward from her brow. She has been convicted, or not convicted, accused of some sexual impropriety with Lancelot. And the situation is thus. She is surrounded by some guys, including Gawain, who is the last person who should be accusing her of sexual impropriety, because, with the exception of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Gawain is known in the Arthurian legend for having loose ways and trying to get with women frequently. So this is a hypocrite who is accusing her of impropriety. Notice the way she manipulates her body to control the men, to keep them from, tying her up, throwing her in prison, or worse. She throws her wet hair backward, and then she pretends as if what they've just accused her of was like a physical blow, as if she'd been struck in the face. And as if her cheek burns, she must touch it because she's so hurt by what they've said. And then she continues the performance by pretending she has a mobility impairment and walking away with a limp, though her head is proudly lifted up. The tears dried quick, so she takes a moment, a breath, and then she proceeds. Line 11. O knights and lords, it seems but little skill to talk of well-known things past now and dead. God wot, I ought to say, I've done ill, and pray you all forgiveness heartily, because you must be right, such great lords. Still, listen. So it sounds as though she's admitted that they are right to accuse her. But then, in the midst of that bit of an admission, she turns it. She says, you must be right, such great lords. She's mocking their position and their masculinity and actually questioning it. If the tone of the reading is appropriate, and I think it's appropriate to layer it with a little bit of sarcasm, we see that she doesn't mean exactly what she's saying. Then she says, here's a hypothetical. Listen, suppose your time were come to die, and you were quite alone, and very weak, yea, laid a-dying, while very mightily the wind was ruffling up the narrow streak of river through your broad lands running well. Suppose a hush should come, then someone speak. One of these claws is heaven, and one is hell. Now choose one cloth forever. Which they be, I will not tell you. You must somehow tell of your own strength and mightiness. Here, see. Yea, my lord, and you to ope your eyes at foot of your familiar bed to see a great God's angel standing with such dyes not known on earth on his great wings and hands, held out two ways, light from the inner skies, showing him well and making his commands seem to be God's commands. Moreover, too, holding within his hands the claws on wands. And one of these strange choosing claws was blue, wavy and long, and one cut short and red. No man could tell the better of the two. After shivering half-hour, you said, God help, heaven's color, the blue. And he said, hell. So she comes up with this hypothetical to make a point. She says, imagine you were dying. Now, Guinevere was not dying, so to suggest that she is in the same position is spurious. But she says, imagine that you were in a mortal situation, and your life depended on what seemed to be an arbitrary choice. It was not clear what was the right thing to do. That's what she's suggesting, that she didn't know that what she did was wrong until after the decision had been made. Line 39. Perhaps you would then roll upon your bed and cry to all good men that loved you well, ah, Christ, if only I had known, no. Lancelot went away. Then I could tell, after he's out of my presence, then I can think clearly. But when he's around, I'm just a wet noodle. I just kind of wrap around him. Like wisest man, then I could tell, like wisest man, how all things would be, moan and roll and hurt myself and long to die, and yet fear much to die for what was sown. Nevertheless, you, O Sir Gawain, lie. So she basically admits to infidelity with Lancelot, but then returns to this defense, Gawain, nevertheless, despite what I just said, you are lying. Whatever may have happened through these years, God knows I speak truth, saying that you lie. Now, we don't get to know exactly what he said, what precisely the accusation was. But notice how much she is admitting to. Her voice was low at first, being full of tears. But as it cleared, it grew full, loud, and shrill, growing a windy shriek in all men's ears, a ringing in their startled brains, until she said that Gawain lied. Then her voice sunk, and her great eyes began again to fill. Though still she stood right up and never shrunk, but spoke on bravely, glorious lady fair. Whatever tears her full lips may have drunk, she stood and seemed to think, and wrung her hair, spoke out at last with no more trace of shame, with passionate twisting of her body there. So after she utters the initial lines of her defense, then the narrator tells us that the volume was rising throughout her defense. Isn't that curious? Instead of letting us know that she's getting louder and louder as she goes, we're told this after the fact. So we're able to imagine it one way as we read it, and then layer over that the description that follows about the volume of her voice. And I think it's important to understand that at least in this instance, her body is being used to ward off any attack. When she cries for her, and this becomes clearer as we move throughout the poem, it's part of a ploy. It's a stratagem, right, to hold off any kind of physical violence against herself. And she twists her body, right? She's always drawing their eyes to her body because she knows that that can befuddle them, can mesmerize them. She continues, line 61. It chanced upon a day that Lancelot came to dwell at Arthur's court. At Christmas time this happened, when the heralds sung his name, son of King Bon of Benwick, seemed to chime along with all the bells that rang that day, o'er the white roofs with little change of rhyme. Christmas and whitened winter passed away, and over me the April sunshine came, made very awful with black hail clouds. Yea, and in the summer I grew white with flame, and bowed my head down. Autumn, and the sick sure knowledge things would never be the same. So as the seasons change, so does her so does her emotional state. When she bows her head, it's almost like she's yielding to the inevitable, here the inevitable being her desire. And the knowledge that things are never going to be the same, she says, makes her sick. However, she does not retreat, she does not run from temptation like Lizzie did in Goblin Market. However often spring might be most thick of blossoms and buds, smote on me, and I grew careless of most things. Let the clock tick, tick, to my unhappy pulse that beat right through my eager body, while I laughed out loud and let my lips curl up at false or true. Which suggests that she did know the difference between right and wrong, right? She just decided to ignore the distinction. Seemed cold and shallow without any cloud. Behold, my judges, then the cloths were brought. While I was dizzy thus, old thoughts would crowd, belonging to the time ere or before I was bought by Arthur's great name and his little love. Must I give up forever then, I thought, that which I deem would ever round me move, glorifying all things for a little word, scarce ever meant at all? Must I now prove stone cold forever? So that little word would be yes. She's referring to her marital vows and her willingness to commit to Arthur for life. She also accuses him, without evidence, in line 83, that he didn't love her. Now, depending on the version of the Arthurian legends that you read, this can seem actually quite true, that he's so involved with the Round Table that he has little attention, little time to give to his wife, which could help to justify what she's saying here. But in the poem itself, we don't have evidence of this, because Arthur is not present, and he's not spoken of very often by even Guinevere. Pray you, does the Lord, so she's referring to God here, does the Lord will that all folks should be quite happy and good? I love God now a little. If this cord were broken, and she's referring to her connection to Lancelot, if this cord were broken, once for all, what striving could make me love anything, in earth or heaven? So, day by day it grew, as if one should slip slowly down some path worn smooth and even down to a cool sea on a summer day. So she's describing giving in to her love for Lancelot as succumbing to gravity, being pulled downhill. Yet still in slipping there was some small leaven of stretched hands catching small stones by the way, until one surely reached the sea at last and felt strange new joy as the worn head lay back, with the hair like seaweed. Yea, all past sweat of the forehead, dryness of the lips, washed utterly out by the dear waves or cast in the lone sea, far off from any ships. You have to imagine this woman drawing attention to her body as she speaks. This is going to become crystal clear in a moment, but already she is asking them to think about her body. She's using this. It's a power that she wields to keep them at bay. Do I not now know of a day in spring? No minute of that wild day ever slips from out my memory. I hear thrushes sing, and wheresoever I may be, straightway thoughts of it all come up with most fresh sting. Whatever happened between her and Lancelot, which she does not give us the details of. I was half mad with beauty on that day. So again, she's asking them to consider her the way she looks. And she says that she was unsettled. She was off kilter because of her own beauty. It made her mad, right? And went without my ladies all alone in a quiet garden walled round every way. I was right joyful of that wall of stone that shut the flowers and trees up with the sky and troubled all the beauty to the bone, yea, right through to my heart, grown very shy with wary thoughts. It pierced and made me glad, exceedingly glad, and I knew verily a little thing just then had made me mad, had made me completely mad, because she already said she's half mad. All this beauty, her beauty and the beauty around her, unsettles her. I dare not think, as I was wont to do sometimes, upon my beauty. If I had, and now she's going to raise part of her body and ask the guys to look at it. If I had held out my long hand up against the blue and, looking on the tenderly darkened fingers, thought that by rights one ought to see quite through. There, see you? Like, look at the arm that I'm holding up. See you where the soft, still light yet lingers round by the edges? What should I have done if this, my own beauty, had joined with yellow-spotted singers, and startling green drawn upward by the sun? But shouting, loosed out, see now all my hair, and trancedly stood watching the west wind run with faintest half-heard breathing sound. Why there, I lose my head even now in doing this. So even now, thinking about my beauty, I'm becoming a little bit unhinged. But shortly, listen. In that garden fair came Lancelot, walking. This is true. The kiss wherewith we kissed in meeting that spring day, I scarce dare talk of the remembered bliss. So this is obviously not just a kiss between friends, she's remembering it as a passionate kiss. When both our mouths went wandering in one way and aching sorely met among the leaves, our hands being left behind strained far away. Okay, so when she says Gawain is lying in what he's accusing her of, I don't know what she is denying, because she's confessing, she's admitting to so much right here. Never within a yard of my bright sleeves had Lancelot come before, and now so nigh, that is, so close. After that day, why is it Guinevere grieves? I had such a good time with Lancelot, there was no point in being unhappy that point forward. Nevertheless, you, O Sir Gawain, lie. Whatever happened on through all those years, God knows I speak truth, saying that you lie. Being such a lady, could I weep these tears if this, that is, if this that you accuse me of, were true? A great queen, such as I, having sinned this way, straight her conscience sears, and afterwards she liveth hatefully, slaying and poisoning, certes never weeps. So she's pointing to her aristocratic upbringing and her status, her class status, and saying, if I were guilty, then my guilt would change me. I would not be able to stand before you as confidently as I now do. Gawain, be friends now. So this is a different tact. Speak me lovingly. Do I not see how God's dear pity creeps all through your frame and trembles in your mouth? And then, right after appealing to his pity, she begins to threaten him. Watch this. Remember in what grave your mother sleeps, buried in some place far down in the south. Men are forgetting as I speak to you. Because Gawain had accused his own mom of infidelity. Oh, I'm sorry. His mom had been accused of infidelity by Agravain and murdered by him. So it kind of runs in the family. Buried in some place far down in the south, men are forgetting as I speak to you. By her head severed in that awful drought of pity that drew Agravain's fell blow. I pray your pity. Let me not scream out forever after when the shrill winds blow through half your castle locks. So you don't want me to haunt you, do you? Let me not shout forever after in the winter night when you ride out alone, in battle rout. Let not my rustling tears make your sword light. Ah, God of mercy, how he turns away. So just imagine Gawain turning from her at this point. So ever must I dress me to the fight. So she continues back on the attack and defense. So let God's justice work. Gawain, I say, see me hew down or cut down your proofs. Yea, all men know, even as you said, how Meleagrance one day, one bitter day, in La Face Garde, for so all good knights held it after, saw, yea, sirs, by cursed a knightly outrage, though you, Gawain, held his sword without a flaw, this Meleagrance saw blood upon my bed. Whose blood, then, pray you? Is there any law to make a queen say why some spots of red lie in her coverlet? Or will you say, your hands are white, lady, as when you wed. Where did you bleed? And must I stammer out, nay, I blush indeed, fair lord, only to rend my sleeve up to the shoulder, where there lay a knife point last night. So must I defend the honour of the lady Guinevere? What she's referring to is a time past when Meleagrance had charged Guinevere with adultery after finding blood on her dress while she was staying at his castle. The blood was actually Lancelot's, who had cut his arm climbing through Guinevere's window, but Lancelot defended her honor, saying it came from wounded knights who had been placed in her rooms. So she lied then about where the blood came from, and she's lying again now. Let's see. Not so, fair lords. Even if the world should end this very day and you were judges here instead of God, did you see Meleagrance when Lancelot stood by him? What white fear curdled his blood? And now his teeth did dance, his side sink in, as my knight cried and said, Slayer of unmarred men, here is a chance. Setter of traps, I pray you guard your head. By God, I'm so glad to fight with you, stripper of ladies. because he had pulled up her sleeve to show her arm, or she had. Let's see. Stripper of ladies, that my hand feels lead for driving weight. Hooray now. Draw and do, for all my wounds are moving in my breast, and I'm getting mad with waiting so. So Lancelot, who had been wounded, he actually is still willing to fight Meleagrance in defending Guinevere's honor. This is all still a flashback. He struck his hands together o'er the beast, who fell down flat and grovelled at his feet, and groaned at being slain so young. So Lancelot kills Meleagrance. At least, my knight said, rise you, sir, who are so fleet at catching ladies. Half-armed will I fight, my left side all uncovered. Then I weet, up sprang Sir Meleagrance with great delight upon his knave's face. Not until just then did I quite hate him, because now he thinks he has the advantage, because Lancelot is going to fight one-armed. As I saw my knight along the list look to my stake and pen with such a joyous smile, because Lancelot is excited to be fighting for Guinevere's honor, it made me sigh from agony beneath my waist chain when the fight began, and to me they drew nigh. Even Sir Lancelot kept him on the right, and traversed warily, and ever high and fast leapt Caitiff's sword, until my knight sudden threw up his sword to his left hand, caught it, swung it. That was all the fight, except a spout of blood on the hot land. For it was the hottest summer, and I know I wondered how the fire, while I should stand and burn against the heat, would quiver so, yards above my head. Thus these matters went, which things were only warnings of the woe that fell on me. Because later on, all of this dissension is going to split the kingdom in half. And actually, Guinevere is going to end up eventually in a nunnery, apart from Lancelot and apart from Arthur, isolated. Yet Meleagrance was shent, for Meleagrance had fought against the Lord. Therefore, my lords, take heed. So, might makes right. This is an idea you find all the way back in, you may remember Beowulf, with the idea that if someone wins in a fight, they have God on their side. With all his, therefore, my lords, take heed lest you be blent with all his, that is Meleagrance's wickedness. Say no rash word against me, being so beautiful. Again, her appearance as her defense. My eyes, wept all away to grey, may bring some sword to drown you in your blood. So there's a threat. See my breast. She's actually asking them to look at her chest. She says, see my breast rise like waves of purple sea, as here I stand, and how my arms are moved in wonderful wise. You can imagine her moving her arms sinuously before them. Yea, also at my full heart's strong command. See, through my long throat, how the words go up in ripples to my mouth, how in my hand the shadow lies like wine within a cup of marvelously colored gold. Yea, now this little wind is rising. Look you up, and wonder how the light is falling so within my moving tresses, so her hair. So he's asking them to scope her out, to look up her body. Will you dare, when you have looked a little on my brow, on this face, to say this thing is vile? No, the physiognomic principle, that surely beauty is positively correlated with virtue, right? Can you look at all of this voluptuous body, and accuse it of being evil? Or will you care for any plausible lies of cunning woof, where you can see my face with no lie there forever? Am I, that is her body, not a gracious proof? But in your chamber Lancelot was found. She ventriloquizes this accusation and responds, is there a good knight then would stand aloof when a queen says with gentle queenly sound of, oh, true as steel, come now and talk with me. I love to see your step upon the ground unwavering. Also well I love to see that gracious smile light up your face, and hear your wonderful words, that all mean verily the thing they seem to mean. Good friend, so dear to me in everything, come here tonight, or else the hours will pass most dull and drear. If you come not, I fear this time I might get thinking over much of times gone by, when I was young and green hope was in sight. For no man cares now to know why I sigh, and no man comes to sing me pleasant songs, nor any brings me sweet flowers that lie so thick in the gardens. Therefore, one so longs to see you, Lancelot, that we may be like children once again, free from all wrongs just for one night. Did he not come to me? What thing could keep true Lancelot away if I said come? So, in other words, he was in my room because without his presence I was going to be bored and I might become morose thinking about the past. And he's a really good friend, so he stayed up all night with me, so I would not feel lonely. And then she says, there was one less than 3 in my quiet room that night. Which is a way of saying it was just the 2 of us. But instead of saying it was just the 2 of us, which implies, an intimate space, she says the number 3, but subtracts from it 1. So you get 2 is implied, but just notice the manipulation of words here. And we were gay, that is, we were happy, till sudden I rose up weak, pale, and sick, because a brawling broke our dream up. Yea, I looked at Lancelot's face. I could not speak, for he looked helpless too for a little while. Then I remember how I tried to shriek, and could not, but fell down. From tile to tile the stones they threw up rattled over my head, and made me dizzier, till within a while my maids were all about me, and my head on Lancelot's breast was being soothed away for its white chattering, until Lancelot said, and then she stops. As if it recognizes that she's telling perhaps more than she wishes. She stops and then says to Gawain, by God, I will not tell you more today. Judge any way you will. What matters it? You know quite well the story of that fray, how Lancelot stilled their bawling, the mad fit that caught up Gawain, all verily, but just that which would save me, these things flit. Nevertheless, you, O Sir Gawain, lie. Whatever may have happened these long years, God knows I speak truth, saying that you lie. All I have said is truth, by Christ's dear tears. And I think we can accept that at face value, because she has admitted quite a bit. She would not speak another word, but stood turned sideways, listening, like a man who hears his brother's trumpet sounding through the wood of his foes' lances. She leaned eagerly, and gave a slight spring sometimes, as she could at last hear something really. Joyfully her cheek grew crimson, as the headlong speed of the roan charger drew all men to see. The knight who came was Lancelot at good need. So Guinevere has used her rhetorical skill to erect a shield, a wall, between her and her oppressors, those who would hold her to a standard of moral purity which they themselves, we know in the case of Gawain, have not been holding to. So given his hypocrisy, given the fact that she is one against many, that she is an unarmed woman against armored men, I think there's a lot to sympathize with, despite the fact that she admits to a lot of infidelity with Lancelot. And I don't think that William Morris is particularly interested. I mean, in praising infidelity, he himself would be a victim of that when his wife, Jane, started modeling for Dante and took up with him, they had an affair. What William Morris is so adept at doing is describing psychological states, at taking us deep inside the cavernous recesses of a character's mind, and particularly a character like Guinevere, who in Sir Thomas Malory, or whether it's Lancelot du Lac, or some of these other Arthurian legends that extend back centuries, all the way back to Geoffrey of Monmouth, Guinevere is not someone who's given a lot of time, and we don't gain access to her mind. But here, we are most definitely inside her mind, because she's speaking her mind. And it's a mind that twists and turns. It's very hard to hold on to, and that works to her advantage, preventing her from being she's surrounded, but it prevents her from being violently mistreated. And what it is, the final lines reveal, is all a tactic to delay them until Lancelot can rescue her.